Your intro and don't.
Yeah. What's up, guys? Blacklisted Voice, episode 53. We're here with George Briones of SofLete. Did I say that right? I fucked
It's
up
okay,
your
buddy.
last.
It's all right.
My bad.
It's all good.
George, why don't you give a little intro for yourself? You and I go back to 2014 at the CrossFit Games. So
Yeah. But we actually are tied a lot deeper
yes.
than just the CrossFit and the CrossFit Games. And I knew of Kyle Spears over when I was a recon Marine as an instructor. I know you were over at Third Recon. We were in the same deployments in the same time period together. I think we transitioned certain time periods or whatever else during that time and moment. Never cross pace. And then, as I was getting ready to transition out, I was really big into the CrossFit space. I was coaching CrossFit athletes. I was working weightlifters. And I think it was like my first ever, or it was my second CrossFit Games ever. And I forgot who it was. I don't know if it was Recon Sniper Foundation or somebody was pushing the fact that we had a reconnaissance Marine veteran.
One of those Facebook groups.
Yeah, it was one Facebook group, one nonprofit or whatever was posting about we had a recon veteran Marine in the games on a team. And we were like, for me, man, that was like inspiring and fucking influential, or being influenced by those actions because of like, hey man, I'm coaching athletes now. I'm trying to be competitive in the CrossFit world. Like that's the kind of people I want to connect with. Mm-hmm. And and when we finally met in 2014, I think we were walking around not the athlete camp, but the Games Village. The general village.
Home Depot Center.
And it was like 4 recon Marines all walking to running into each other at the same time. I don't know what happened. I don't know.
I think we tried to meet up because we created another Facebook group for it specifically. Yep. And then I think we tried to meet up, but legit, I think it just happened organically where we all just ended up in the same spot at the same time.
It was weird. It was like all of a sudden we had 4 dudes around us in like a security circle inwards instead of outboard, just bullshitting and talking. And I think it was the first time I had connected with a bunch of dudes outside of the community as being an active duty Marine, because at that time period I was an active duty still. I was getting ready to transition out. I was on my way out of the Marine Corps.
That's right.
That was my first time ever having the experience of the community for the tactical world in terms of your recon community, right? Because let's be completely honest, love the brothers and we love each other to death, but sometimes we get very sucked into this very small circle of ours and we don't look elsewhere, which there is a reason for it. But when we also leave in transition, we kind of fall into that as well, or we forget about those leaving. And it's kind of one of those things where I was like, man, this is fucking cool. Yeah. So long story short, I ended up keeping in contact with Kyle from then on. I mean, I've seen you go through your career from an athlete to where you're a professional coach now, working with athletes who are trying to get to that next level, and you're still doing the thing, right? That says a lot.
Yeah. It was, I think we just pretty much stayed in contact over Facebook, and then you came out to Georgia a couple times when I first moved down here. When did you get the gig with SofLete? I can't remember when that was.
So the gig with SofLete actually started up literally December of 2014, actually. So Fish, who's the owner, he's also a reconnaissance Marine. Yeah. He hit me up and he saw me getting out. And by that time I was already coaching.
Wait, Fish over at Third?
Yeah. Brent Fish.
2008 to 2000, time frame?
Yeah.
No, yeah, dude. I don't know if he remember me, but
dude, I'm pretty sure he would.
Cross paths.
I'm pretty sure he would. And he hit me up. He was like, hey man, I see you doing great things with, I was working with athletes already. I think I had developed 3 or 2 youth national level weightlifters at that time period in 2014 and 13 as an active duty Marine, still reconnaissance instructor, me still working on the side as doing strength coaching. And I think I started that probably 2012. And, I was doing that. I had already had an athlete start really doing really well at the regional level and the open level in terms of CrossFit at that time. And I was working with tactical athletes just already as an instructor. So Brent called me up as I'm transitioning out and he was like, hey man, what do you think about coming over to this company that I'm getting ready to start? He's like, it's going to be out of my gym out here in North Carolina. He's like, we're going to try and overtake mountain tactical athlete. We're going to try and show hey, and SEAL Fit and all these other tactical populations, how to train properly and for the job, not just from a physicality standpoint, but more than that. And I mean, I was on board with it already, right? I was kind of transitioning out. I was like, well, all right, cool. I'm kind of falling into this world. And for a few years with the company, man, all we really did was just program. I mean, that's all I've done for the past, I've written a fuck ton of training programs. Let's just say that.
I remember talking to you at one point in time, and you're like, yeah, I'm writing like 6 different 12-week programs over the next week. I'm like, damn.
Yeah, dude, I've done that. I've done that. And, you know, I've learned my lessons from that. And I'm also now like no longer do that. I have a teammate who works with me who runs a lot of the programming now, and I oversee it and still do that. But it was kind of like a rite of passage, just like what we have in the recon community. You know, there's a rite of passage that you have to gain experience and learn. And that's kind of the same thing here, man. And like, you know, now as a company, we really focus, and this is something been wholeheartedly, is like the holism of the athlete, like the humanistic part of the athlete. And because of the fact that, like, I think as a whole, not just from the tactical space, but also when we look at the CrossFit community, because I know that's where we met. Like, that's kind of where like my roots were planted, was in the CrossFit world. And I will always love it. And I'll always coach CrossFit athletes. And I also know that I can only work with a very minimal individuals, because on terms of CrossFit, because of the amount of, I guess you said, want and need that they deserve from a coach, if that makes sense. You know, because it's a privilege to have an individual coach. I really, truly believe that. So, like, you know, learning to work with individuals in a very small group manner, you know, I mean, I'm working with only 2 CrossFit athletes. I've been working with 2 CrossFit athletes now for probably a year and a half, 2 years. But guess where both those CrossFit athletes are? One's just qualified top 120, got hit with the reps thing, just like every single fucking other athlete in the world, which I'll take accountability for as a coach, that when I watched it, I should have said something after watching it. At the same time, she's an athlete. She's been doing this now 12 years, bro. She's been competing in CrossFit. We've been working together 5 years together out of that 12.
Right.
She's about to be a hopefully 8-time regional level athlete, or 7-time, 1-time. It, like, those are relationships I like building. But I learned that through the recon community and through like working with tactical professionals. And I think that, going back to your original question, bro, of like what got me into SofLete and how did I start with him, it was realistically the CrossFit community had me, you know, diving deep into like learning about human performance, learning about sleep, nutrition, eating better. I mean, on my paddle getting out of the Marine Corps, dude, it says paleo bro, CrossFit bro. Like that's all I was ever like consuming the last 2 years in my time of the reconnaissance community as an instructor, you know? So it's just kind of like, yeah, my heart and soul's there, dude. Like, I've ran my own gym, dude. I've like worked with fuck ton of athletes. And at the end of the day now, it's just like, you know, I'm transitioning to the other side, dude, to where it's like, I love working with athletes. I love writing programs, but I also love developing these like educational pieces and
for sure
these other worlds that like do more than just help the athlete. And I think that's where, you know, as CrossFit athletes and as tactical professionals come into, and I'm going to talk in that way just so everyone knows in the podcast, because that's where I come from and I understand it's where you come from, and I'm just trying to meet everybody on that universal language aspect. But looking at the two, realistically, it's just an identity, right? Like, at the end of the day, when you strip away their identity, you strip off the uniform, you strip off the semifinals jersey, you strip off whatever gym shirt you wear, you're just a human, right? And like, for that like profession, or for that identity of like being a CrossFit athlete, to succeed, you have to focus on the human aspect. And I did it, you did it. I'm pretty sure athletes you're working with still do it right now. And we're trying to teach them how not to do it. That they're like, hey, for that identity piece, that jersey you wear, for that to succeed, you have to succeed in your human side of the house. And I think we leave that off the table whenever we do work with athletes. And whenever it does come to competition, and when it does come to like trying to qualify for these big level platforms of racing CrossFit, or going into selection, or running Best Ranger Challenge, or the Recon Challenge, or, you know, whatever endeavor it is you have in the military, or fire department, or police department, or LEO, like, you still, at the end of the day, you still have to take care of the human. So, you know, how I started with SofLete, and going back to your question again, was, you know, hey, Brett saw this in me, and I've been very, very lucky for him to like continue to believe that in me and see me continue growing. And like many people, I didn't go get my degree in exercise science or kinesiology. I'm getting my degree in sports psychology in like my last like few classes. And that there actually, I think, has been the most beneficial piece to my foundation as like the human, because it hasn't only amplified my profession, it's also amplified my personal life as well. Which has been really cool, because you're learning about the human psyche. But realistically, in the Eastern world of psychology before Western took it over and fucked it all up.
There's a combination of the two that works best.
100%. I love the fact that you just, because I was getting ready to say that, right? Like the Eastern world used to talk a lot about the spirit and the soul, and like under psychology, that's what it was. It was spirit. It was your soul. It was like those things. But then, of course, when we come into the Western side of the house, we have to utilize science because we got to question every single thing that's true, you know, and it's true. You know, the only day that we see people question if it's true or not is April Fool's Day. Someone made that observation the other day, and I was like, holy fuck. That is the only time we ever use a scientific method to go ahead and find out if something is true or not. But every other day, we're just like, I'm just going to consume it all and believe every single thing that comes out. And you're like, just because you know that you're going to be tricked, you now want to go, you're like, get the fuck out of here. You're getting tricked every single day.
Yeah.
But sorry about the rant. So bringing it back, man, like it's just always been a big piece of like learning about the human body from a physiological standpoint, but also it really took a dive into learning the human body and the human mind and the heart and the spirit also comes into play. And, you know, I'm a dude covered in tattoos talking about soul and spirit and heart, but it's like, dude, you know, if you're an athlete listening to this and is like on that cusp of like that 120 or on the cusp of making that like 10% in going into the quarterfinals, because I'll tell you what, the quarterfinals is fun. Like as much as people and coaches, I'll tell you, man, after the quarterfinals weekend, I'm just like, Jesus Christ, I only work with 2 athletes. I can imagine coaches who are, you know, who are working with fucking 10, 12 athletes. Like, fuck that. No way. But at the same time, it's a fucking blast, no matter the number of athletes you get to work with, because as a coach, you put in so much heart and effort and spirit into it. Because again, your athletes shine when you bring that spirit in. I recognize that this weekend too, just as much as every other coach or athlete noticed that. So yeah, man, you know, bringing it full circle, I was seen as this fucking redheaded stepchild in the world of like, George is weird and talks about these unauthorized like ideas and tries to blend the intersection points together. And it's just like, yeah, man, this is where it's gotten me though, to where we can have fucking cool conversations about this, to where it creates a different lens to look at and view and think from.
Yeah. One thing I think that CrossFit has done an excellent job of is opening up the discussion for more than just hard work, and bringing in like more of a holistic, like, hey, you know, if you're not mentally there, like your performance isn't going to be there. And if you're not fully slept, fully fed, your performance isn't going to be there. And I, you know, part of that kind of sucks because people had to go through that to learn that. And God bless those people for destroying their body.
And you're talking to 2 of them who I'm not gonna lie to you. I had to refix everything. That's the only reason why I'm able to like have these conversations. And like talk from this, you know, not just from a research and literature perspective, because for the longest time, dude, I didn't know how to utilize that. I didn't know how to use that to my strengths. It was a limiting factor for me. So all I used to lead by was like, hey, this anecdotal experience is what it is, but now I can like tie things back to it. It's the same thing with you where, hey, there's a reason why we're talking about this. And even transferring this over to the tactical space, it's the same exact thing. Right. So that's why I said like the CrossFit competitor, the CrossFit athlete, or the individual who identifies with I do CrossFit, and with the individual who identifies as I do, you know, tactical professional stuff. Like that's the things. Hey, the difference between the two obviously is going to be life or death. Let's just say that, right? Right. And the variables in the CrossFit competition are quite predictable because we know the workout. In the tactical space, they're unpredictable. But what they both need and what both of them have and what intersect is the adaptability piece and that human piece and that durability piece, that like, if I can focus on all those things, no matter what happens, if I can improve the human side, the sleep, nutrition, heart health, right? How to understand nervous system and feel when their nervous system is on a super high and when they know when their nervous system is on a super low. Oh, cool. Well, do you also know how to recognize when your psychological state's all fucked up and you're like not at 100%, and then you can be aware and transparent about it? Oh, do you know how to actually reduce stress from the day of stress? Do you know how to reduce fatigue? Because again, I can teach you those things, but I'm not going to hold your hand until you fucking croak over and die at the age of 60, 70, or 80. Fuck that. No, like I also have a life to live and I have to help other people and I have to learn also, you know? It's just like, it comes down to, dude, like one thing I love, again, CrossFit did a really good job of it, and SofLete's doing a beautiful job of it, is being able to teach this idea of human education in real life ways, meaning that we're not taking people out of their high stress environment and putting them into a low stress environment, teaching them these skills and then expect them to go back into a high stress environment and perform those skills. That's not how you learn. That's not how skills are developed. Right? Why would we do that to someone when we're trying to change behaviors that are only going to make them better? Right? And I think that's, again, like you said, I'm going to be honest, like CrossFit started moving in that direction. And I wouldn't say it's CrossFit in general. I think it's the coaches who are in the forefront right now that are making those changes happen, because they are seeing these behaviors make such a dramatic impact on the athlete's career.
Right. Yeah. Like CrossFit is performance driven. So you have to figure out exactly how to develop your performance, where some of the, tactical side of things, you can get away with just a really strong mindset and like just to fucking put your head down and work, where it, it would potentially be a little bit easier if you were to bring in some of these other aspects to it. But yeah, I think like one thing I wanted to ask you is like, when I was going through, my schools in the military, it was literally just fucking grind. And like, whatever damage you did to your body was the damage that you did to it, and you'll suffer the repercussions later or not, like, whatever. So how, like, taking that mindset, and I've been out for 10 years now. So maybe the mindset has shifted a little bit, but like, how do you take some of these like health oriented and different mindset and like stress reduction, and then tell somebody who's literally living in, hey, quit being a fucking bitch world, that these are some things that you need to focus on and work on in order to improve your performance in your job?
It's a beautiful question, dude. I've actually just got done running a legit case study on a program that I developed last year, and we just got a bunch of data back and we just sent out the report cards. And that's the idea. Like when I was talking about this high stress situation and this lifestyle and this environment someone lives in, I got to actually work with individuals in that world from a remote standpoint. And what I found from that was that you had to go ahead and help teach the individual how to understand that balance of, all right, ego-driven task in a positive way, meaning like, for example, we'll use our terminology, having to get off that bird at 2 a.m. with a ruck on your back. And I can't take credit for that. Again, I could take, who threw that at me was Danny Dreyer, who was having a conversation with Major Cramps, who, again, you need that ego side of the house. That's where that comes in. But then on the opposite side of that, you need that self, that I, that spirit, that soul piece that focuses on the human, the sleep, the nutrition, how to manage cycle, and how to reduce stress. Because if I can do that here, when it's time to come over here and switch to go ahead and put the ego hat on, and I have to make that door breach, I have to exit that bird at 2 a.m. I have to go ahead and make that fire call at 3 a.m. in the morning. I have the gas and energy to do so. So what does that look like for the CrossFit athletes? The same way. Hey, I got quarterfinals coming up this weekend. I know that I'm probably going to go ahead, and some athletes did it over the 3 days. Some did it in 1 day. Some did it in 2 days. I understand that that's going to require energy, and that's going to put stress on my mind and my body, because I'm going to be giving full effort. Well, maybe leading into that for the next 6 weeks, I actually now kind of prioritize all of these things to help amplify it. Now, you heard me say 6 weeks, and I did that on purpose because that's what a lot of people do. What I'm trying to highlight is the fact that, like, if you can find very small, worthwhile changes from a behavior standpoint and all those things that you can do on a consistent basis that doesn't throw off your routine or make anything weird happen to your day, guess what that does for you over time? You naturally just start to do it, and you naturally learn this new baseline of health. Right.
And then naturally your performance.
Correct.
And you can just kind of turn it on whenever you need to.
Correct. So you've now improved your tolerance and your capacity to stress. And that's all I'm really doing. Take out the tactical professional, take out the CrossFit athlete, the endurance athlete, just because I've worked with ultra endurance athletes. I work with weightlifters. Take all that and just look at it from the stress aspect in the middle. All I'm trying to do is improve your tolerance to stress and how you manage it and how you recognize it, react, and realistically respond to it. because that's what we are all trying to do, is how do we respond to stress? And that is, you know, when I look at it as a whole, how do I do that? That's literally what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to tie and find intersects to all these things while I'm talking with this individual and stitching them up to where now it's like they're stitched up from the ground up, dude, and they're ready to rock and roll. And when they start noticing fucking negative headspaces pop in, when they notice they fall off eating a little bit, or they're not sleeping enough anymore, they're not drinking enough water, or they're not doing the things to like help manage their psychological state, or they're not going for their fucking walks every day or 3 days a week, they come back and they're like, why do I feel like shit? They can then take their own actions that they've done in the past and be like, well, I felt this way when I did this.
Yep.
And it seemed like it worked. Maybe I should throw that in a little bit more. How do I do it in a like simple, realistic, and manageable way in my real life? I'm not taking no one out. And like that case study is what taught me all of that, was that like, oh shit, like I had to like tie data numbers to it. So I had to use the lead HRV, resting heart rate. I mean, I had nutrition surveys, occupational psychological perception surveys, bro. I developed this occupational units from, you know, their day of work and how we did it, just much like we do for training session load. I did it for occupation. You know, I had them do psychological state surveys, you know, first of the study at the end of it. And when you start having this, it wasn't the fact that I changed training programs or I told them to go sleep and do this. No, it was the fact that they were able to like bridge the gap between like their profession and the human, and it just made them want to go ahead and just find a way to do it consistently. So that's all it was, man. Like that's the way I look at it now. From that to this, how do you do that? So taking someone who has to go to selection and have this conversation all the time. I have that conversation all the time. Well, you guys are talking about hippie shit and doing X, Y, and Z, and it's like, yeah, but you know what, if you need me to turn it on when I need to, guess what I can do? And I call it turning on Sergeant Briones.
Sergeant Briones?
Yeah. Like, you know, I tell the wife, like, hey, baby, if you need me to get shit done, tell me Sergeant Briones needs to kick it. Because that's the ego side, right? Like, that's the ego side of me. And then it's like, hey, when it's time to be just GB3, because that's how I'm known by, or whatever, George, like, and I'm the husband and the father, and I'm the coach, that's a totally different part of me, right? But I've learned to have like this psychological flexibility to where I'm not snapping or breaking. I'm like bending and maneuvering and changing and like doing what I have to do and morphing into like who and what I need to be in that time and moment. I'm just becoming an octopus within like the world I live in. That's realistically what I'm doing.
Yeah. There's one thing I want to come back to, but I wanted to kind of make a point that we had talked about a little bit earlier. Or maybe it was a couple months ago, but I remember sending you a text message or having come to this realization of starting to compete again and realizing like, man, the ego is such a survival mechanism. And like, kind of to your point, like when you get into shit, like you have to figure out how to allow yourself to survive. And so letting that come to the top and just like being okay with, hey, I'm going to be a fucking take care of myself in this stressful situation, but then backing it back down to, and having the awareness to back it back down is another hard thing to do, where you can take yourself out of that stressful situation and just kind of chill, relax, and let yourself and be engulfed in the world again. Is something that when I started competing again was a realization that I came to, is like, because a couple years ago I listened to Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy. And I was just like, oh, fuck the ego, you know, like it's the worst thing ever. Everyone's selfish, blah, blah, blah. But in some respects, you have to be selfish to be able to perform. But where's the boundary of, hey, I need to be selfish now, and how do I turn it off to be a giving human being again? I think like when you're in performance state is when you need to be that selfish human being. And then when you're out of that performance state, you need to bring yourself back down so you can become that giving, caring human being again.
Yep. I love the fact that you point that out. Because again, it's a skill. That is a skill to develop. That's ultimately what it is. And like, that's what I'm trying to get to, is like, hey, everything in life around us is just a skill. It's like, remember playing Zelda as a kid?
Not my favorite, but I did dabble.
But yeah, right. But the thing is, it was like, what was cool about Zelda is that you got to run around collecting a bunch of potions, fucking weapons, points. You were just automatically just gathering all these things to go fight the enemy and do whatever it was, or be ready for what it is at any given time in the game. it's performance on demand, right? Like, do you have the flexibility to have the performance on demand? And that's where, like, for me, Sergeant Briones kicks in, right? Like, there's times where it's like, man, I don't like bringing Sergeant Briones out. Like he's a fucking asshole. And like, I don't like being an asshole to myself anymore, like I used to back in the day. I'm not saying that I'm sensitive about it. I just like, no, like he's an asshole sometimes. Like, and
not only to like
everybody around him, but
to himself too.
Yeah, like it's like, fuck, man. But it's also kept me alive. Right? Like in some of the like the most deadliest combat zones, it's kept me alive. And I have to thank him for that. So it's like, I can't just get rid of him. I actually like him. Like, I love him. Like, that's part of me that like makes me who I am, who gets to leave this mustache on his face, you know, who, you know, just like who gets to do all those things, you know, like there's a part of it that allows for you to live because it is survival. Right. And, you know, I like the fact, like, and falling into the same, and I got to meet you at this point too, is when you said, like, I used to say, fuck the ego and it's all about the self. I fell down that path too. And I was like, I don't like this. I still feel angry. I don't like, I'm like I'm too far deep in myself. Like, how do I fix this? And then it was like, oh, I need the ego. And dude, you know, that was the biggest part again. And again, what taught me to bring the ego out again from all of that was the fucking, you know, the reconnaissance community was like this brotherhood going back to, again, this group of men who just like help solidify and motivate you and push you forward and hold you to a certain standard, which it makes you feel really weird because you're like, can I live up to that standard? And you then have to start working hard for it. We can do it in a healthy way is what I'm trying to say. And like, that's what I'm looking at is like, we can do this in a healthy way. And that's the only thing I'm trying to find is like, yo, I want to help dudes get better at fucking kicking doors down, fighting fires, taking down fucking dudes in Crenshaw and, you know, or whatever else, and doing first responders, do cool shit. Right. I want to be able to say like, you know, hey, go look at that athlete. I know he's an athlete under, you know, me or whoever else, just based on the way he looks compared to everybody else.
Yeah.
Because that's action.
Right. Yep. It's definitely like a learning process, kind of like a skill. Like you said, we just made a post about one of my athletes' muscle ups over time. And like, you know, it's a long-term progress. It takes time to get to where she got to. And it's the same thing with like developing a balance between, hey, when do I turn this on and when do I turn it off? And it takes a lot of time. I mean, I started really diving into this, you know, being in the reconnaissance community. That mindset really helped me as an athlete for, you know, 8 years of my career. I just fucking head down, work, and put in some really solid efforts. And now over the last kind of like 4 to 6 years, I've been starting to kind of try and discover more about, you know, what is this that made me tick back then? Is it healthy to live in that all the time? Because I got run the fuck down. And where's that balance between the two of, hey, when do I turn this on? When do I turn it off? And you know, for me, it's more about like focusing and caring on about other people and helping them out and, you know, looking after their best interests. And then when is it time to bring it back internal and focus on what's going on with me? And so it's a never ending process. And like, you're going to have slip ups where like, fuck, I shouldn't have fucking been selfish there. I needed to give more. And you're going to have times where it's like, fuck, I needed to not give in that situation and be a little bit more selfish. But yeah, it's like it's a skill and it's a never ending process.
I like the fact that you do point that out, right? Because it's like, I did a video on like suicide, I think was in 2020 on suicide with a company called Honey Beer Training. And I said this, I go, what I heal within myself, I heal within the world. And I truly believe that. So it's like, you know, as I'm being selfish with myself, right? And I'm also knowing that, hey, like this time and moment, I'm also helping others as well, right? Because the actions are showing the new behaviors or, you know, the way
almost like a lead by example type thing.
Correct, right? And like that's something that's in the recon creator, you know, you do lead by example, right? Like that's the goal, right? And you know, I had a conversation with an athlete yesterday. She reached out and she was like, dude, I know why like my last 3 months have been super low energy and like just whatever else. Like she's very spiritual. That's like, she's super cool. And, and she's close to the family as well as a friend, but she's also a really good athlete in terms of ultra endurance running. I mean, her first 50 miles, she dropped in 11:30, 11:26, 11 hours and 26 minutes, 50-mile race. That's a sub 14:30 pace for 11 hours, bro. It's moving over. Like, it was like $4 or $5 grand of fucking elevation. But I worked with other athletes who finished like 100-mile races, and some really awesome times and done some really cool things. But her past 3 months have been really inconsistent of like running. It's just been more skiing, more hiking, more snowboarding. Work's been like crazy, and she's just been trying to like battle some things. And we talked yesterday, and she was like, I'm so excited to like start giving this energy out. And I was like, well, don't forget to give the energy to yourself.
Yeah
Right. And I'm sorry, like I went through that whole thing, but I'm trying to get to the point is that like we fixate on like how much effort we put into specific things and how much effort we put into specific people. In general, we put this idea of like how much effort we put into objects, but we forget to focus on like putting that energy into ourselves, when to rest, when to know to use, the ego, when to use the self. And realistically, I look at it from this idea. It's just intentions. Like, what is your intention when you're walking into a room? Right? Because, when you walk into a room and I walk into a room, we see totally different things. It might be the same exact room, but we see completely different things. And that's fair. But at the end of the day, though, it's like, how do I allow myself to go ahead and process the information that I'm being given or I want to give it to somebody else to where it's still focusing on like keeping myself in a very healthy state and those combined tensions and boundaries. So going back to this ego, and I enjoy talking about this stuff, but I also like I've learned to like bring it a little bit closer to just like in general the athlete and just being like, yeah, if you have to do 30 thrusters for time at 155, right? Like that's a shitty workout. 30 thrusters at 155 for time. Hey, but you're also going against 120,000 other athletes for this. This workout, there's nowhere to feel sorry for yourself right now. Right? Like there's nowhere to feel sorry for yourself. And that has to be an intention behind it. Being like, all right, cool. I'm going to set these boundaries and these intentions and see what I can do at the most like optimal potential and performance I can, because I've now set these intentions to be like, hey, I'm going to send a sniper bullet down the round and I'm going to get after it. Or, hey, it's a training session instead. And we're just seeing what your body does from a training perspective lens and like not giving that pressure to you. Because that's realistically what it is. It's pressure. So how do we then create these intentions, left and right lateral limits, and these boundaries around this pressure that we're either putting ourselves or others are putting on us to perform at our best? And it comes back down to, when you say like, hey, taking care of myself, I love giving to others and I love, working with others and I love doing this, but it's like, we also have to focus on like loving ourselves and working in that realm so that we can then, drop that hammer when we need it, and it's cool, man. I'm glad that you remember that text message about like what we talked about. Cause the ego is survival, man. And some people's way to fuel that like part of their brain, right, that survivability aspect, is putting themselves in a high state of stress with CrossFit. Some people like to do it with their job from the tactical professional community. Some people utilize jiu-jitsu. Some people like running fucking for hours on end. Some people like swimming. Some people like doing a bunch of everything. And if that's the case, like it's still, no matter what that is, you still have to focus on the human, tying it all back together.
Yeah.
And that comes from intentions and those left and right lateral limits and those boundaries. And I don't think we talk enough about that.
Yeah. So I missed a little bit there. My computer was lagging a little bit.
Oh, you're good. I think you might still be able to get it.
Yeah, I think it'll come through. One thing, so I guess bring it back to the thing that I wanted to ask before we went on that long tangent. Just from like, so this is kind of like a macro perspective, right? Like we're looking at, ego, self, how do we interconnect to those things, and how do we focus, on developing like our recovery aspect to it so that we can turn on the ego. what are like kind of 3 things that you see that are pretty common, or maybe even just like 3 talking points that you give to people to really start to kind of bridge that gap and allow them to kind of learn like, hey, this is, this is important. Does that make sense?
Oh, dude, yeah, it's a good question too. Fuck, man. The test is usually a math run or some kind of like low endurance piece. Like, hey, how are you?
So you give like
a physical effort?
Exercise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, hey, how are you with like going for a walk by yourself with no earphones and no cell phone and just being in your own head?
The best.
Some of us, when you start to understand what it can do for you. And the reason why I do that, or I ask that question, and it comes down to the fact of, well, how comfortable are they being in their own head?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you just can't sit inside a room with nothing around you and be okay with like daydreaming, there's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because then it's like, okay, cool. Then you then have issues in certain types of physical efforts, or you manage stress a certain way, right? Like you can't tell me that someone who is not okay with sitting by themselves in pure silence and just hanging out and don't need their cell phone, don't need nothing, can daydream. They probably handle stress a lot better than the individual who can't even walk for fucking 20 minutes without their headphones and their cell phone in their hands, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I kind of equate that to like somebody who's able to do that is able to kind of disconnect from things and disconnect from stress per se, or understand that they can walk away from it for a little bit. And then somebody that isn't able to do that needs to live in stress because they don't want to pay attention to what is going on in their head.
Yes. So then what usually follows up with like a question like that is, oh, I don't mind doing a 30-minute long ass workout with music in my ears blaring and going hard as hell. And I'm like, okay, now we're using physical fitness as a wrong behavior. Like that's not a healthy behavior. That there is going to burn you out. It's going to you're disconnecting from whatever it is. And like, I get it. Sometimes we need to do that. And I will tell you, I've been there before. But
sometimes you need to work the hate out.
Dude, 100%, right? But it's not, you shouldn't be constantly working the hate out.
Right.
It's what I'm trying to say is like, you need to learn to develop new activities and behaviors to work the hate out. I like that, to work the hate out, right? Like there's days where like, I just want to I just want to work out in the gym with no music, maybe a ski erg, some sandbags and a kettlebell, and just fucking flow for 45, 50 minutes at an easy heart rate, and let the fucking duration fuck with me, not the intensity.
Yeah. I like that.
Because like,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying like, that's the issue, is that like, we think that like replacing intensity and duration is going to go ahead and fix it. And it's like, well, no, all you're doing is just jamming pack down that fucking issue or whatever it is you're trying like to get away from. When it's like, hey, maybe we just do the same workout, just move the intensity way down and and increase the duration and see what the duration does for you. Because now what I just did for you now is I just improved your cardiovascular fitness, which is shown and proven to improve psychological state. I've now just taught you how to go ahead and look internally, because you now have to go ahead and listen to yourself. And a lot of people don't like listening to themselves. Right. Do you see what I'm like? All these little tiny, small, minute things can just make a big impact, but it's the conversation, meaning that, hey, I'm telling you to do these things and why we're doing them. Here's the reason why, so that you can go ahead and have the fuel to be like, all right, cool. And then we can have a conversation afterwards behind it. That is like a huge piece into like me trying to figure out an athlete and being like, all right, how are we going to go ahead and respond and recognize and react, to stress? Like that's ultimately the idea behind it.
Yeah. So somebody that isn't okay with going on a long walk without headphones, no distractions, just kind of like figuring themselves out, how do you start bridging that gap with the individual who's like, I need stress all the time to distract myself from myself? What are kind of like some of the first steps you might take in getting that individual to be okay with going out and riding a bike for 30 minutes or going for a walk or going into the gym alone and not, and exercising for 30 plus minutes?
So I look at it from playing. So I talk about this idea of like playing. I don't think we play a lot as adults. I think that we've gotten so regimented into this fact of like, I have to do the X's and O's on this spreadsheet or on this fucking app because it's telling me to, and I forgot how to play. So when we go into this feeling of like, I'm tired, I'm burnt out, I don't feel good, I'm exhausted, I still have to do the X's and O's on the thing. And if I don't do it to that standard, then I'm a failure. I'm like, it's like, dude, that's the worst mentality to have again, right? Like if you notice what I'm looking at is like, I'm looking at the lens in which they view their world from. Because that does drive their mood, which then drives their thought process, which then drives their worldview. That's simple, just human behavior. So if I can go ahead and change the way that their worldview is to a specific exercise or a training session, it then changes their mood, which the goal is to improve and have it going upwards in a healthier way, which then changes their thought processes. For example, dude, I had an individual I worked with in 2021 for the Best Ranger Challenge. He took second at the Best Ranger Challenge.
Hell yeah, congrats, man.
Dude, huge, right? Like that was last year. And I self-endorsed the fuck out of that, dude, to be able to say like I had a team take second at Best Ranger Challenge. Like that's a big thing in the tactical community in terms of the Army.
For sure.
But guess what we did? He already had that and I forgot how to use the word, but it's like that tactile grit and that knowledge already, meaning that he knew when he had to use the ego. But what he didn't know how to use was how to recover from using the ego so much. So I started throwing in like these 30-minute like low aerobic around the world type training sessions with like these weird movement stuff. But like I still gave him some strongman things to like, feed his ego a little bit. And then it would like have rest periods where like, hey, go for a 400-meter walk with nothing in you. So I started throwing in these left and right lateral limits, right? And all of a sudden now, next thing you know, he's like, 4 months in, and he's like, because we worked almost 10 months leading into, or 8 months, 10 months working up into that, like 4 months. And he was like, bro, I would have never thought you'd have me doing this yoga fucking down hippie bullshit. And he wasn't doing down yoga. He wasn't doing yoga. He was literally doing this low aerobic training session. And in his eyes, he viewed it as like hippie shit. And I had him tracking resting heart rate. We were talking about heart rate metrics on training efforts. And, I was noticing his recoverability increase. I mean, there's be days where like he would hit a, 12-mile ruck in the morning and then come in the afternoon, and because this block that we were in, I'm utilizing was in their peak block. In his peak block, he would come in and I need him to go run, the O course into a 5-mile kit run. Why? Because that's specificity. It's mimicking the event, but he had to do that. Right. And then all of a sudden the next day he has a heavy training session in the gym. And then he has another run day or an aerobic session day. And then all of a sudden the next day he has a heavy strength day. And like I'm moderating intensity and fatigue. But then, what we started seeing was his recoverability, his RPE towards these training sessions started to lower. His resting heart rate was still decreasing. He was recovering really well. And it wasn't that I just sat here and told him like, hey, bro, go for a fucking 30-minute walk. No, it was like, hey, man, let's find enjoyable things that you still think is working out. And let's make it fun and let's make it playful. And that's all I did. Right. Like playing for me looks different. Like I posted on my social media the other day, running through a fucking creek. Right. Like how many times have you ran through a creek as a kid? I used to do it all the fucking time.
Yeah.
Right. Like how many times did you run through a ditch bouncing from sidewall to sidewall? American Ninja Warrior does it now. It's like, man, I was doing that when I was fucking 8 years old as a kid. Like you got adults who can't do that shit nowadays. Like that's sad. Right. Like,
yeah.
So it was just like developing a way to create this play session to where they perceived it as like a healthy thing and they were still working out.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's literally what I'm doing. An endurance athlete, most time when I pick up endurance athletes, they were trying to get ready for races. They want to improve their times. They want to get faster. I slow them down. I give them left and right lateral limits of heart rate work and let's go for it. Because now it's like, I have them doing this 45, minute run at an average heart rate of a 140. You know how it feel, how slow you have to run to keep your average heart rate at a 140 for many people. Some people have to walk that, bro.
Yeah, I was about to say for all CrossFitters, they're walking
because they're aerobically deficient. Like that's what we can look at is they're deficient. But if I can get a CrossFit athlete to run a 45-minute run at an average heart rate of a 140, they're fit, they understand their heart, they know how to manage their psychological state. And I'm pretty sure they're doing everything on the other end that they're doing. Now, there's obviously been training progressions leading up into it, right? Like, hey, you got to get used to this way of training. You find a new stride, you learn how to breathe with it. There's a whole bunch of technicality to it. But what I'm saying is this idea of just playing and like being okay with giving yourself some of this like lower aerobic, this little bit of this love type training, because it's fucking fun, man. Like, it is fun, dude. And that's what this training is supposed to be about, as a CrossFit athlete. And I understand that, like, for a tactical professional, like, I understand the job's risk is a little bit higher and unpredictable, but it also needs to be fun. And if we're not having fun with it, what are we doing?
Right. Just stressing yourself out more.
Just stressing yourself out, dude. So at the end of the day, dude, to answer your question, like, obviously what would I give someone to like help lower that intensity block or teach them how to lower it? Yeah, man. It's like, hey, how well are you at like just kind of being in your own head for 20, 30 minutes? Can you do that? Sweet. And if you're not, guess what? You're going to do a lot of that in very different fucking ways, because guess what? Like, I understand sitting on a bike or going for a walk for 30 minutes all the time can get boring. And I understand that. And again, as the coach, I need to keep the training and I need to keep the effort in a very healthy manner without overloading the athlete, right? I need to give them something fun that allows for them to go ahead and perceive it as enjoyable, because then guess what they end up doing? They end up wanting to train more. Dude, this whole sports psychology degree, man, has like just hammered me home in terms of like looking at training protocol sessions and training sessions in general. Dude, like, how do you get an athlete who has PTSD? And when I use PTSD, I use it in a very open wide, because CrossFit athletes experience this, where they do a workout so fucking hard that they can no longer get back to that place anymore to push hard. It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you for a little bit. How do we get someone to find that again? Dude, there's a legit psychological theory that talks about how to do that. And it's called dual mode. It's a dual mode process, meaning that you take the athlete and you set up sets or time durations, and you have them start at a very enjoyable pace, and you have them recover and you have them increase their pace. By the time they know it, they've naturally, just from a neurological perspective, are getting better at dosing those higher intensity paces where they feel comfortable to be there again. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a legit thing. CrossFitters need to get really good at handling fucking pain. And that's kind of the conversations. Go for it.
I've actually, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good, dude.
I've started to have this thought. CrossFitters need to get better at handling discomfort.
Correct.
No, I don't think not necessarily pain, because there's a difference I think there's a big difference between the two. Like, what you're experiencing physiologically is discomfort. What you experience in your fucking knees and your shoulders every day is pain. And you need to know the difference between the two.
Especially while in a workout. I like the fact that you I love that, because you are right. Like, let's go ahead and put some left and right limits on when we have this topic conversation of, oh shit, no, you're right, dude. Like, pain is actually used in this very way of like, let's push through the pain. And when we push through pain, what ends up happening? You end up breaking yourself. And like, discomfort, I think, is the step below.
Goes away.
It does go away, right?
Pain is chronic.
It can be constant.
It can be.
But discomfort is only for that short window of stress, right? That window of stress is how discomfort you are. We need to take the athlete from a 6 and move them up to an 8. Because if I can get the athlete to handle discomfort better, I know that they're going to go ahead and be better than anybody out there, because I know they're tough, they can handle discomfort. And that's what we're seeing with these athletes now in the CrossFit community. Is like, they're not, the 300 athlete in the quarterfinals compared to the 120th athlete. Yeah, there might be some physical limitations there that might be holding them back, but the real difference is the mentality and is the psychological state of those athletes are different. And I only point that out is because I've literally, the past year with Carly, we've worked on that psychological piece. Yeah, has she gotten fitter? Sure. But all we've worked on is that psychological piece. And when I psychological, we talk about like, hey, we started building more of that like self-internal confidence and that believing in myself. When we started driving from the heart instead of driving from the mind. And, we saw a huge increase in performance in a very short amount of time because we were able to like have that flexibility. Now, again, this comes from working with athletes of all different walks of life, of being like, no, they're all the same in a very small manner, but that very small piece, if we can go ahead and find a way into it and like help kind of reorganize and recalibrate it, dude.
Love what you're doing with your hands right now.
I know, right? We end up seeing it, evolve and grow. And I think that's the biggest cool fucking thing about being a human performance coach or a coach or a mentor, however you want to view yourself. When we get to work with these individuals, it's like you got to help in that. You got to walk alongside them to do that. And yeah, man, I think it's just it's a powerful place to be in as a coach when you can understand and you have those intentions behind it. To be completely honest, man. Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at creating long lasting life changes and getting the individual to help understand their body a little bit better and what's going on a day to day. And I mean, just bringing awareness to somebody is like life altering for most people, and just being able to have that individual be like, oh, I am stressed out, will create just crazy amounts of change for that person. So not to like, I'm trying to phrase this, but like, I feel like some people are naturally better at like self-examination and like awareness and stuff like that. And then there's other people who need individuals to kind of point things out to them, and not saying that the individual who is a little bit better at self-examination doesn't need that. But where do you think like that comes from?
Exposure from growing up as a kid to where they're at in that time and moment. So if you're a product of your environment, and this is something I've been talking about, I'm in a class right now, and it's dreadful, man. It's like, it's coaching psychology. I love it, but it's like, I've been doing coaching psychology now for almost 11, 12 years without realizing I was doing coaching psychology. And it's funny you asked that, because I just had a similar question like that for a DQ question this week. And what it came down to was exposure, experience, and their experience and exposure to learning new skills.
Okay.
And how they handle stress. So there's 4 of them, and the stress they've been through, right? So it's going to be exposure, experience, right? And then their exposure and experience to a new skill or practice they've performed, and their exposure and skill on how they manage stress. And all I'm looking at from that perspective, I've just taken they call it the psychological injury model is kind of the way it looks at it. And it takes in personality, it takes in psychological state, it takes in stress history, it takes in, a bunch of other variables that allow for like, hey, if this person is experiencing all these things and they're now in the red, they're in a higher increase for injury. So bringing it back to like, how do I go ahead and, like you said, you have one athlete who is so well at seeing this self-examination, transparency, they can call themselves out. And then you can have someone who's never even been experienced to that at all and doesn't even have it's because of their environment, right? We're a byproduct of that. So within that environment, they're missing all of those things.
Okay.
Right. So they have to learn those skills, meaning that they just have to start learning how to like develop new skills outside, and again, recalibrate some of the behaviors they've had from the environment they're in. Because now, again, the issue that I have with sometimes with words is this idea of abnormal, right? The only reason why things are abnormal is because it doesn't fit in within the context or the circle in which you are around. That's it. For example, if I sat here and started smoking a J on your podcast, it would be abnormal. It would be legit. You would laugh about it. And George is smoking a bowl on the podcast and doing this thing, but that would be abnormal for your listeners and the people who watch it.
Yeah.
Now, but if I went onto a Joe Rogan podcast and I was just sitting and have a conversation with Joe Rogan, I smoked a joint instead because I don't drink much, right? It's like, yeah, I might have a glass of whiskey with you, bro, and a J on the show. That's not considered abnormal. That's considered normal. So you see how like this context of abnormal becomes. So it's the same thing here where, hey, the person who had no experience or taught skills how to manage stress, or they weren't experienced enough, or they didn't put in those experiences, it's because it was abnormal in their environment. Now, when we go and take the athlete who's really good at self-examination and they've like learned to be transparent and hold themselves accountable, it's because of the environment and the people in which they had around them. So that's how I look at that. So yeah, this is the reason why, hey, athlete A, let's just say athlete A is going to be the self-examination person who's really good. Athlete B doesn't. This is the reason why athlete A actually is a little bit more successful and strives and learns new skills and able to do certain things better than athlete B, because athlete B hasn't been exposed to or experienced or practiced or done any of those things. Now, can I take athlete B and make them athlete A? 100%. But there's a process now. And it's the same idea with your athlete who you talked about, the ring muscle ups. She was athlete B for some time, and now she's starting to transition over to become athlete A. The longer she continues to work at this stuff from her own actions and accountability, guess what she ends up getting to become? Athlete A. That's realistically all it is. It's just a continuum, bro. It's just that's how we fix, that's how we help aid, and that's how we provide this idea of like, hey, you started here. I only think the reason I look at it from that perspective, bro, is because I've just fallen into jiu-jitsu like crazy. Like I've done no-gi and like we've done grappling and shit like that in the Marine Corps all the fucking time, and boots and utes, and like, but it was never like, and McMap, it was never technical shit. It was just like, I'm just gonna fucking try and tear your head off, and half the time we were drunk doing it. Oh man. So like I started getting into it now, but more in terms of the art and like the inside the Kimura, the gi, learning how like that feels and playing that game, and then also still playing the no gi game. And what I started finding was that like, man, I'm such a beginner in this sport. I'm like way here. It's like I see athletes that are way over here, and it's like, well, how did they get there? It's like, oh, well, right now I'm athlete B, bro. I'm trying to get to athlete A. But how many times have you been athlete B?
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's the idea, is like, if you've been athlete B a lot of times, you won't have an issue becoming athlete A. Yeah. But if you've never put yourself in an athlete B situation where he has to learn new skills, or let's say that we make a new athlete who's now learning new skills, and athlete C now continues climbing, he becomes athlete A, and athlete B stays over here because his environment is not cohesive to becoming athlete A. Does that make sense? And I hope that answers your question, because that's the way I view those two athletes.
Yeah. I think the analogy, like, well, I guess I'm a picture person, or a visual person. So that like the analogy is like, I think pretty helpful to like understand what you're saying, is like, if you expose yourself to a lot of new things where you have to work to improve on them, your stress is going to, when you do come into situations where you do have to kind of like self-examine and figure out like, hey, like I'm not performing well on this, or I'm not doing well in this, like let's take a step back and look at this and kind of be analytical about it, and then come up with a model or a theory, and then implement that and see if it worked, and then back off again and see, continue to self-examine and look at the big picture of things.
100%.
Yeah. And I think with just inside of, yours and mine, and a lot of, dudes experience inside of the community, you kind of get that naturally when you go from phase one to graduation day.
It's shoved down your throat. Like there's no choosing to do it. And I think that's the point. And maybe I need to add that to this idea, is that, for athlete B or C to become athlete A, they have to choose to want to do that in this world. In the tactical professional world, athlete B and C naturally are forced to go through that process, because they have to become athlete A, where they're the dude who can put 100-pound ruck on their back, do an insert for fucking 2 clicks at nighttime with MVGs on foot, bro, with full kit, dude. Like you have to become that guy. Well, the only way you become that guy is by being forced to do that. Well, no one's being forced to become athlete A in this other world. So you have to choose to do those activities and do those things, meaning that, for example, right now, dude, like I just moved back out to SoCal from Utah. And like I had my environment where I was training BJJ with a really good professor, and like, the environment was cohesive to like try to become better. And I found it out here, right? But at the same time, it's just like, you being able to choose and know, like, I need this to strive. I need this environment to make me better. And I think that just comes from like the whole self-examination, and like, okay, I've been doing this now 33 years. I've now become a little bit more aware and transparent with who I am for the past couple of years now, maybe, let's say since I turned 30. And now what I'm looking at is like, okay, cool. These are the things I want in my life to make sure that I'm set up for success. And that is it. Right. And but again, those are choices. In the past, the tactical community, when I was the reconnaissance Marine, yeah, it was a choice to join, but then from there, it was just forced down my throat, right? You had to pass it. You had to pass schools. You had to pass these phases. You had to hit these time markers, and you found any way to do it. And if you didn't do it, you were not going back to that community. It was like your head was chopped off and you're fucking done.
Literally the worst thing that could
the worst thing ever can happen to you, bro. And like, you never want to be that guy, because when you do see that guy, it is not good for them.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. Right.
And it's at the same time, I think too, like at, I guess 21, 22, 18, 19, like that is the worst thing in the world, because you have literally almost no life experience, I guess. And your world is that. Like there are opportunities outside of that if you are that guy. Like it's not the end all be all, you know. It's just like you definitely, I mean, it sucks and you don't want to be that guy, but if you are that guy, like there's still opportunities in the world for you, you know.
Well, that's the thing though, is like that's where and that's another big piece I want to highlight, is that like I'm not saying that you shouldn't fail. Like that's the cool thing about being athlete C or athlete B who put themselves in these choices, because you're going to experience failure, you're going to experience success. And realistically, another big thing I'm realizing too is like there's no losing, dude. You just learn lessons, and it's just like
learning.
Right. Like it's not like it's not like I'm you know, I'm dead and then I can't come back and do these things, right?
Right.
Like that time's coming down the road, but right now what I want to do is like I want to go ahead and take these, like people will call them failures, and just change them into lessons. And what are the TLOs and the ELOs of those things? And TLOs is determining learning objectives and enabling learning objectives. We used to get that all the time in the Marine Corps as like PowerPoints. So any of the veterans or military active duty listen to it, you guys will get that joke. But yeah, man, I at the end of the day, dude, that's what kind of comes down to. And I think that, you know, we were jumping on this podcast to talk more about like quarterfinals and like the judging aspect of the pistol standard, now that I'm kind of like, okay, cool, I get it, and the sport's evolving, and I dig it, and I'm totally with it. And I feel like an asshole because I should have made my athlete redo the workout if I should have watched it better, but I didn't think anything of it, because again, it's competitive racing CrossFit, and every single rep I felt was there, just whatever, because
it's I mean, you could have a whole podcast on just that alone.
But me as who I am, I'm like, cool. You know what? Every single thing now in her training program, when we're talking about opening the hips up, I'm gonna write it down. For example, she's back to training, and we ended up moving from 120 down to 137. Not that bad. Realistically, it was 80 points, bro. 80 fucking points.
Yeah, it's tight.
I was like, dude, if they only gave her a 300, she would have still been in the 120. So I'm not stressed about it. We were like, hey, we're going to continue moving on, getting ready for semifinals. Like, you earned it. Like, you deserve it. I know that was an issue. Like, you're not the only person. There was like 50 something athletes. And I'm pretty sure if you go through all of those fucking videos you got through the pistols, pretty sure there's more athletes.
Yeah, for sure. Not only that, like you've been doing this for 10 years now, I think was the first regionals. So like, you have 10 years of that happening to other, like you're not the first person to have this happen to him.
No, you know? Right? None whatsoever. You know, I've worked with athletes who got, you know, we made the games and they're fucking, one of the dudes on the team popped for fucking steroids.
Yeah. I mean, fuck.
Dude, like I've had a lot of those things, right? Like it's like, people can say George can't catch a break, but it's like, no, it's just like fucking chips fall where they are. But I can now look at like a movement like that was in my control and was in her control. We should have been a little bit more higher standard than that. And guess what we're going to do from now on?
Higher standard.
Correct. Because guess what? She did an 11:07 on that workout, I believe it was. Yeah. And an extra 30 seconds for 90 or for 60 or 90 reps, however you want to look at that, of just flashing real quick, she would have still made it. Yep. Because all her other workouts were fucking consistent across the board.
Yep. Yeah.
So I can take my accountability on that, man, and be like, you know what? Yeah, you know what? Like, let's just keep training for it. And now, like I said, I now emphasize like, hey, for front squats, she had the other day, we're like getting her legs stronger now. It's like, hey, let's start getting her legs stronger. Let's do some things. Hey, I need you to flash. Oh, we did wall balls, and I'd had her do some wall balls and some hang power clean stuff. I was like, flash the hips. We need to see knee and hip extension because they're going to look for that. So now I'm focusing on it. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only coach who's going to be talking about it now.
No, not at all.
Like I saw Travis Mayer got hit with it, bro. Like a whole bunch of fucking people did.
Yeah. I mean, Noah put up, world's fastest time and got hit with it. So like there's, and obviously like world's fastest time, you're blurring the lines, but like,
But we're racing. That's the
right.
point I'm trying to get to is this is, we're no, like this level is no longer just a CrossFit workout in a fucking gym.
Right.
We're racing.
Yeah. There are components to it now that the finite details are beginning to matter. And it's not just like, hey, you can, 10 years ago it was like, hey, can you do a pistol? Top 100 score in the world, baby.
Right up. Now it's like, can you go ahead and do pistols with GHD sit-ups and then 30 muscle ups with that on top of that?
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, everyone now in the top 300 can.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
How do we then you're right, dude. And I love it. I love the fact that CrossFit is becoming that much more professional because I truly believe that, right? You know, that is the cool thing about it. It's like, cool. Do I agree with how you guys pushed out the regional? Like you had this many athletes do it. That says something about the organization, not just the athletes.
Yeah. I mean, every system is going to be flawed, and the predicament that they're in is a very tough predicament. With the amount of individuals that they need to go through all of these stages of the competition, literally just to fund the competition, and then taking those masses and creating a system that's fair and isn't so time consuming to the fact that you need to hire out a bunch of people to judge these workouts, So I think it's a tough predicament that they're in. Is there a better system? Yeah, probably there's a better system for fucking everything, but hopefully it's one of those things that it's a learning experience, kind of like we were just talking about. And, we as athletes evolve from the feedback that we're getting from them, and they as an organization evolve from the feedback that they're getting from their community. And hopefully it's like, you always hope for the best, expect the worst, but like hopefully it's a hand-in-hand improvement from year to year, and things are getting better for both sides of the experience.
It's not even the system needs to be fixed, man. It needs to be the word, right? Like if they would have just put shoulders in line with hip and knee extension, it would have changed the game.
For sure.
That's all I'm getting to is like words matter. Like if they would have just put that word in there, we wouldn't have seen as many athletes, because I guarantee you a lot of these athletes got hit was because their shoulders were slightly over the top of their hip and knee for a balance standpoint.
Yeah, right. I mean, yeah, when you're getting into the finite details of the workout, like it is like, I went back, we didn't have any athletes to get hit with this, but some, I knew a lot of people, and I was like, man, these are really fit individuals that have never taken no reps in a competition. Like they've done a bunch of competition. Like what the fuck is going on here? And I went back and I watched Mary, and then I went and watched the 2018 handstand ramp muscle up pistol workout. And because the speed is a little bit slower on those pistols, every athlete was opening up at the top of the rep. Now I want to go back and watch 2014 Nasty Girls V2, because that speed was a little bit faster. And you had some like really interesting sloppy reps in that one. But at the same time, that I think is something that athletes needed to be aware of, is just because the reps speeds up doesn't mean that the rep is any different. And bringing it back to, the system again, like to account for every minor like detail of a movement is very cumbersome. And I can understand like up with the rules for that specific movement, for a GHD, for everything, is a super cumbersome thing to do. And people are always going to try and find loopholes around whatever the rules are. There's always, people are always trying to find a competitive advantage. So even if you sit there and you're literally continually updating the rules, even as people are exercising, like you could spend an infinite amount of time updating these rules, and literally have a fucking book of how to properly do a pistol. Somebody is going to find a way around that, and a way to manipulate the movement. So I can understand having the description that they have as their movement standard. But it would be nice to have like some sort of like retro, or not have some sort of retroactive judging you on a workout that you've already completed, where you can't, you know, adjust to what the judge is looking for. Because that's one of the things about live competition is like, you know, your athlete probably would have taken 2 no reps and they're like, all right, here we go.
100%. Or like, hey guys, you have 24 hours to redo this workout if you choose to.
Yeah. So I mean, that would be a good thing.
Dude,
maybe that's
we used to do that. He used to do that because I've had an athlete take who got hit with was it 2017? I had an athlete get hit with burpees. The chest wasn't touching the ground, and it was the camera angle that wasn't showing the chest.
Right.
So they called her on it.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, you have 24 hours to redo this workout if you want to put a new score in.
Okay. Yeah.
We will not take your faster time. If you go faster, we're just going to go ahead and take your regular time.
Yeah. So that's the other thing that's annoying is like a couple of years ago, and maybe this is like, you know, Dave stepping back and new regime change coming in, whatever. But a couple of years ago, there's a fiasco with one of the games athletes, and they literally put out a statement that was like, we're looking for athletes' ability to perform the capacity of work, not necessarily meet the movement standards. And so to that point, they were looking for the athlete to be able to perform the work capacity that they had said that they could perform. And when they saw that, everything was good. And yes, I think it would be be nice to allow the athlete to demonstrate that I do have the work capacity to complete this workout to your standards, you know, that might be skewed in some way, shape, or I might not have understood fully via the wording of the rule book.
Because it takes away so this is the whole idea going back to like working with attached professional, working with the CrossFit athlete, is that like realistically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give control back to the athlete. I'm trying to give control back to that professional so that they can take their own willingness and their own creativity and their own approach to their life to give them what they need. Well, the issue is again, when you go ahead and do something like that and you tell the CrossFit athlete who gets hit with these no reps, right? Because this is how I felt when I got it sent to me for my athlete. I was like, our hands are tied. We can't do anything. Like you can't even go back into the gym and redo the workout to like send it to them and be like, cool. Yeah, I got a fucking, you know what? I got 30 seconds slower.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Where does it drop me at? At least it's not a 2.5 minute fucking penalty.
Yeah.
That a fucking computer system just gave me. How about you give me the ability to go do it the right way? Because guess what? Let's do that. And again, like I said, I think it could have been handled differently. I think that the athletes should have had their chance. And I get it. Everyone will say, well, they should have done it the first time. Yes, but when we start looking at these individuals in that top 120, they are racing, and you're right. And like Carly even said, she's like, I wasn't looking for an advantage or anything. She's like, I've just done my pistols like that for the past 12 years of CrossFit. Like
I never gotten no rep.
Never gotten no rep.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, maybe the angle of the camera was different. Like you saw it was like, she's flashing the hip, but her shoulder is clearly not over the top of her hip.
Right.
So it's like her hips opened up, because you can open your hip up and still be over with the round in the back. Like this is open. I'm open. Yeah. Right. It might have a slight angle. So, and you look at Travis Mayer, you look at Noel Olsen, you look at like, they're fucking flying because they're racing.
Right.
Like you put all of these athletes again in semifinals across the board. That's going to happen. Each judge is going to have their own perception on what a full extension looks like. And that is like, okay, cool. I hope that we see some things change at semifinals this year moving forward. Yeah. Right. So again, I'm not bitter about it, dude. It's more of just like, it's on me as athlete. Like, hey, guess what? We learned a lesson. Let's go ahead and fucking chalk it up. Let's continue training for semifinals. You're trying to go team as well and see what happens with that. Your season's not over yet. Yeah.
Like, hey, it continues. There's a lot better.
This is that psychological flexibility I'm talking about, to where we're not letting something so dramatic like that. And is it dramatic? Fuck yeah. I'm not downplaying it. Like, yeah, that sucks, dude. Like we worked our asses off this year. We went from 250 something last year to 120th this year. Yeah. And now realistically on the leaderboard, by telling us this, we are 137. Fuck that. You're just as fit as all those athletes that will be at semifinals if you don't go. That is my mentality. Because guess what? You'll be there next year. Why? Because we're going to hit the movement standards and you're only going to get fucking fitter. Like, cool. Sweet. Gave us and if we don't make it, you just gave us an extra year
to prep,
to fucking prep, dude. And look what I just did in 1 year. We've worked through an injury. We rehabbed you. We got your legs back to where they are. Dude, leading up to the competition, she didn't clean 220, bro. She ended up cleaning is that in retrospect, not the heaviest in CrossFit right now, but she also just came back from a knee injury. She has a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to take this weekend as a win, bro, as a coach, and being you know what?
Yeah.
I didn't have no other mishaps, and that was the only mishap out of this whole fucking week. Guess what? That was a win, dude. And let's just keep training. Let's keep being ready. But again, though, that comes from the coach, right? That comes from the athlete. That's that environment of being we can sit here and be upset about it, or we can sit here and being hey, shit happens. Let's keep grinding. Let's have fun. But again, it's that. Again, you see it practice in motion.
Yeah. I need to take off here though, so it was good having you on, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Sorry, it was a long podcast.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's all good. If you guys are listening on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram, blacklisted.hq. How do people get a hold of you, George?
Hey, just reach out to me through social media. I'm not doing much remote. Yeah, just social media. Just hit me up, gbriones_3, or email me at george@soflete.com or gb3athletics.com, or sorry, gb3athletics@gmail.com. However they want to get hold.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks, dude.